All right, hello and welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP, online sales magazine and Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from a sunny San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Joel Miller, who is in lovely Erie, Pennsylvania. How you doing, Joel?
Good, John, and I can tell you it's probably as sunny here as it is where you're at, man. We got a heat wave going on.
Oh, nice, nice, nice.
Oh,
You probably got a little more humidity, but that's about
yeah.
it. Probably the difference. And Joel is the best-selling author of "Build Real Estate Wealth: Enjoy the Journey of Rental Property Investment." 35, 35-year career as and you actually were a mobile disc jockey.
Yes, 35 years doing that, but I'm in my 48th year as a
Mhm.
landlord and got into house flipping in about 1991, flipped over 100 houses, and then hard money lending to the other
Yeah.
investors in the area here in
Ec-
2018. And
Excellent,
then the book.
excellent. Yeah, and then what we're going to talk about is the book. And first of all, what prompted you to write the book? What was the genesis of the
Well,
book?
I started writing it during COVID when we were all sitting around with not able to go out of the house so much. But coincidentally, at about that time, my only child, who's a son who's now 19 and a
Mhm.
half, it was becoming apparent that he was going to want to follow in the family business, so to speak, with doing rental properties. And so I can tell you that I actually wrote my book not so much filled with things that I just thought people wanted to hear and would make them buy the book, and that these would be nameless, faceless people that I never
Mhm.
met and who would never hold me accountable. The person that holds me accountable for what's in this book lives down the hall.
Right.
And so it was almost written as though he might be the only one who read it, you know. But I guess my point is that there's nothing in there that I haven't done or wouldn't do, and that I wouldn't tell my own son to do,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
in this business.
So one of the things in the book that you mentioned is starting out with the right mindset, and that's
Yeah.
interesting because I mean most times you hear people just just go, just get into it, go. So what is the right mindset?
Well, it involves a number of things, a couple of preconceptions you got to get past, like
Hmm.
either having the preconception that rental real estate is all broken toilets and bad tenants on
Yep.
one end, and the other being that it's all rainbows and unicorns, and people that get into it expect too much, and then they run into a speed bump and drop out. So you have to understand that it's neither of those things. It's somewhere in between. But the other thing is that I always tell people that they need to get some education, you know, before they get started in this. But let's emphasize the word some.
Hmm.
You don't have to know everything, you know, before you get started with buying rental property or you know, property to flip houses with. And by the way, part of the book is does cover house flipping, but it is mainly about
Right.
rental property. But uh, you need to be careful not to get caught up in what they call the paralysis of analysis, that sort of thing, thinking that, oh gosh, I need to, you know, go to this boot camp or go to one more seminar or do this or do
Mhm.
that, and then I'll be ready to be rich and start buying property. You know, it's uh, you just need to know enough to get started, which is one of the purposes of the book. You
Mhm.
know, I mean, the book is for people that are already established as well, that are looking for maybe something new that will help them supercharge what they've already got. But
Mhm.
it's also for people taking you from thinking about investing in real estate, which is the mindset part, all the way through acquisition and management, and ending up with philosophical things like, you know, discussion between the difference about the difference between riches and wealth, you know.
Right.
But uh, the mindset that I'm referring to really is that like I said, you have to understand to avoid those preconceptions that I talked about, but
Yeah.
also just getting started. You know, getting some education and understanding that you are going to learn as you go along.
Right.
And I am a big proponent of getting involved with professional organizations in your local area. You know, some
Mhm.
people they're called RIAs here and there. You know, Real Estate
Right.
Investment
Yeah,
Association,
yeah.
you know, and just getting with people that are doing the same thing or want to do the same thing or have done the same thing that you're trying to do, and
Mhm.
learning from them, because you will be able to ask questions, and as you are faced with the questions, and just learn, you know.
Yeah. So when somebody decides to get into this, right, and they want to get a rental property, it's finding the right property is obviously a crucial step, and I guess
Mhm.
sometimes people think, well, it has to be somewhere near me or whatever, but that's not the case at all, right?
Theoretically,
Yeah.
although the usual path with people that are getting started is to invest in things that are in their own community.
Hmm.
As you get further along in the journey, there are ways to invest further away from where you actually live on a daily basis, because you become aware of property managers, or, for example, syndication deals where you're just a limited partner and you have absolutely nothing to do with
Hmm.
the property, and you can buy into those anywhere without even ever visiting those properties. But in the beginning stages, for the most part, it's not a wise idea to try to invest far away from where you're at. It's hard enough to be a landlord 15
Hmm.
minutes from your property, let alone the other side of the country, for example.
Yeah. So what would you look for in a first property? I mean, if somebody was just wanted to get started and they have limited funds or the limited access to funds.
Uh-huh. Well, as far as what to look for in the property and how to obtain the property are kind of two different things. But
Hmm.
just to answer the things to look at it in a property, naturally, the main thing is, since what we're talking about here is a financial transaction,
Yep.
we want to make sure that it makes sense from a financial standpoint in terms of cash flow and in terms of whether this thing is going to increase in value for you while you own it or not.
Hmm.
That's a business model some people have. They're buying C and D grade properties that are not going to increase much in value, but they cash flow like crazy in the beginning. And anyway, I always caution people, especially on flips, but this is also true in rentals, to be cautious not to buy what I call a yeah but property. And
Right.
a yeah but property is a property that is something you could make look nice with throwing a lot of money at it from for cosmetics and so on.
Hmm.
But even when you're done, there's something about the property or the surrounding property that you can't change, that somebody looking at it is going to say, yeah, but this is nice.
Hmm.
Yeah, but the railroad tracks are 50 feet behind the house, or there's a junkyard next door. Or there's an obsolete floor plan or something like that. So
Right.
that's my caution about the property, is that it's not something that is going to fail to cash flow or fail to appreciate, um, and that it's not something you can't change about it, after you fixed it up and so on.
Mhm.
But as far as what to look for in terms of acquiring the property, oftentimes people that are starting out are best, they have their best luck with what we would call seller finance properties,
Right.
where they can put a low amount of money down, because typically banks are more in the 25 to
Sure.
20% down,
Mhm.
and you might be able to arrange um, a seller finance deal. Like my son bought his first property a week out of high school, last year, and uh, he got 5% down on a seller financing deal.
Mhm.
So you might get better terms and so on.
Just for the listeners, explain what seller financed is.
Well, it would be where the owner, the current owner of the property, is willing to sell the property to you and
Mhm.
allow the deed to transfer, but the seller becomes the bank. In other
Right.
words, they hold a mortgage. Maybe you give them a certain amount of money down, a percentage of the purchase price, for
Mhm.
example, but then they have a bona fide mortgage recorded against the property that has monthly payments on it, just like you're paying the bank.
Mhm.
But that's often a good investment for the seller, depending on what stage they're at. Like, for
Right.
example, I have never really sold off properties until recent years, but when I did, I actually only entertained offers from people who wanted to do seller financing, because I didn't want to get all the money at one time
Right.
and then
Right.
have to figure out some other place to invest it in that was better than what I could, the return that I could get from the interest on a seller financed mortgage.
Hmm.
So,
What are some other ways of financing these deals?
well, one of the best ways for somebody getting started is to is to purchase a property that is multi-unit, say 2 to 4 units, that and the investor is going to actually live in one of the units
Hmm.
and rent out the other ones. And especially on a 3 or 4 unit place, you're likely to have more income coming in than all your living expenses and your mortgage payment
Right.
to even be there living yourself. And then maybe you move from that into a single family home, for example, or a different, larger, nicer rental that you're going to live in one unit, but you
Mhm.
don't sell the first one. Now you
Right.
rent out the place you used to live in
Hmm.
as well. So when you combine that with the possibility of having, let's say, an FHA mortgage, because you're going to live in it for at least a year,
Hmm.
that's what 3.5% down, and you can have more than one of those, just not more than one at one time.
Hmm. Yeah.
So if you bought your first one like that and you wanted to move on fairly quickly into a second one where you did an FHA mortgage, you would have to refinance that first
Mhm.
property to eliminate the FHA.
Yeah. And do you recommend, people, or just it depends on their portfolio, like self-manage or use a management company?
Well, when you start out, you pretty much have to self-manage
Mhm.
because numbers don't make sense to be paying somebody else. Plus, you need to learn this stuff. You
Mhm.
need to learn how it's done so that when you do go to hire a property manager, you can tell whether they're doing their job right.
Right.
You know, that's kind of the same as what I say about the mechanics of owning property. A lot of people get hung up about the fact that they're not very handy or whatever.
Mhm.
They don't like to do any kind of carpentry or plumbing or electrical or the
Yeah.
typical yet
Mhm.
minor things that come up on property. And what I tell them is, you don't have to know how to do that stuff. You just have to know who to call.
Yeah.
Now, when I started out, I didn't really know anything, but my dad was still alive. And although he was not an investor, the only property he ever owned was the house we lived in. He taught me a lot of things as we worked on those first properties together. We would tackle things that we didn't even know what we didn't know, or I
Mhm.
didn't know what I didn't know. He did, he knew, and he would teach me. So, as in the early years, I did most all of the property maintenance myself, but that was okay, or I'm glad that I went through that phase, because then as time went by and I had more property and it was impractical for me to do that, I
Mhm.
I needed to hire other people. And so through my own experience, I was able to know what could be done, what should be done, how it's supposed to be done, and a reasonable length of time that it takes to
Mhm.
get it done, so that when I went to hire somebody else, I could tell whether they were doing it right and doing it in the reasonable length of time. And then eventually I would also learn if they were charging me the right amount of money.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And most importantly, yeah. And I guess, for anyone listening out there today, it's amazing what YouTube can teach you about
Oh yeah.
some
Oh yeah.
very simple repairs that maybe once upon a time you thought. I mean, I even, to be honest, the other day I was got a quote for changing the outdoor lights and in our house, and it was ridiculous. And then I looked on YouTube and I thought, "Oh, I can do that myself.
Hmm.
Save
Hmm.
myself a bunch of money."
Yeah. Now,
Um,
if you get bigger and bigger and bigger, you
yeah.
do less and less and less, and you get to maybe someday you say, "Hey, the less I do, the more money I make."
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Exactly.
as
Yeah.
your worth ends up being more in your ability to find deals and finance them and make the decisions, as opposed to doing things that you wouldn't pay somebody $25 an hour to do.
Yeah. So, what about tenants? Like, how important is it to select the right kind of tenants?
It's paramount
Mhm.
to select it, and I talk a lot about this in the book. I mean, the book covers everything from mindset to entity formation
Mhm.
and acquiring and financing and managing property, like you would expect to learn in the book. But I do spend a lot of time on tenant selection. Let me ask you a question, John. When do you think property, or excuse me, when do you think tenant selection actually starts?
Tenant selection actually starts. I mean, you
Yeah.
would assume after, yeah, after you've found the building and got it, the property, and you have it ready.
Yeah, yeah. Most people don't even say it starts that early. They'll say something like it starts, well, when they call and ask you about the apartment. No,
Mm,
tenant selection actually begins when you are thinking about the possibility of maybe perhaps buying some rental property,
mhm,
because every decision you make after that slowly narrows the universe of people that are likely to want to rent in this building.
mhm.
Um, pardon me. You know, decisions like where the property is,
Yeah.
obviously, like what part of town. Is
Mhm,
it your town even? You know, um, what type of building it is. Is it a single family or is it a, 20 unit apartment building, um, and how you prepare it, like how nice it looks,
yeah.
and all those things are whether you realize it or not, you're making decisions about who's willing to rent your property.
Mhm.
Then eventually you interface with the prospective tenants or callers, applicants, and then it gets into tenant screening.
Mhm.
And, tenant screening is the evaluation of their application or actually asking them questions live.
Mhm. Yeah, and so so it's almost like almost in sales where by the time you get to that point you have your ideal tenant profile maybe, you have what you're looking for in a tenant.
Sure, yeah, and that can change from property to property.
Sure.
Yeah, you have standards which can vary a little bit from property to property in terms of the required income. I mean, that's kind of based on how much the rent is,
Mhm.
and not all apartments rent for the same amount. Obviously, it's the most obvious thing. Um, but one way or another, you're looking for people that are going to pay the rent on time and not beat the place up.
Right, right, right. And then in terms of management, like what is like if somebody was getting into this, what would they typically have to do in order to manage the property ongoing? What are the demands on them?
Well, being property out in the weather, nothing gets better if left alone.
Right.
Laws of physics. So you're going to have um, the typical maintenance on a property that you would have, whether it's your own single family home or not.
Mhm.
And so your management is going to encompass not only the property management itself, but also the financials,
Mhm.
pardon me, and as we were just talking about, the tenant management. Property management and tenant management are actually two different things.
Right.
In one instance, you're managing a physical uh, object, and in the other, you're managing people.
Mhm.
You
And
know,
what are some of the
different skills
yeah,
involved.
what are some of the issues that come up with people? Like, what are some of the common ones that maybe people wouldn't anticipate?
Well, even if you have a good tenant that's you've had for a while, and uh, typically pay the rent on time and so on, they can have a life event that changes
Mhm.
all. Most people are only one life event away
Yeah.
from uh, being able to meet their obligations or not. You know, and the same is true with working with contractors. Um, a lot of contractors are one life event from becoming your favorite guy to I'm not going to call this guy anymore because
Right.
you know things have changed.
Mhm.
So you always are going to have decisions to be making regarding the property themselves, the finances connected with the property, and the people that are living there.
Mhm.
So
And
you
just
would be to answer your question,
mm,
you know, you'd be surprised what what can come up. We're
I
talking to
probably
people here,
yeah, I probably wouldn't be actually. And just finally, Joel, you mentioned something earlier that I wanted to come back to, and that is understanding the difference between riches and wealth.
hmm Yeah, it's kind of like the difference between knowledge and wisdom. A lot of
Mhm.
people use the terms interchangeably, but knowledge is simply the you have the facts, you know stuff, but wisdom is being able to apply that to do good for you
Mhm.
and your community.
Do
Apply
you know?
that
Do you know?
knowledge
I'll
properly.
give you a definition of knowledge versus wisdom. That was an Irish. I'm originally from Ireland, but Irish rugby captain gave in an interview. He said, "Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not. Wisdom is knowing that it doesn't go in a fruit salad."
That's a good one. That's a good one, John. So the parallel with riches and wealth, I mean, riches is simply acquiring the cash. You have the
Mhm,
cash, but wealth is knowing what to do with the cash for
mhm,
your own good and the good of your community. um, I I'm I'm noted in this area for what I'm going to tell you here that I might give this as an answer to somebody that's talking to me about some sort of a conflict. I would say, if I had a choice of losing all my relationships and losing all my money, I would lose all my relationships in a heartbeat
mhm,
because my relationships will help me reacquire the money that I lost. If I had a pile of money and I had no relationships, that's kind of empty.
mhm.
You wouldn't have anybody to spend it on; it'd be worthless. Uh, so ultimately, what I would say is that don't make a withdrawal from a relationship just to make a deposit in your bank account.
Oh, that's excellent. Great, fantastic words of wisdom to finish on. Thank you, Joel.
Oh,
This has
boy.
been great. All of Joel's information will be below this video. And again, I would encourage you to go check out the book. You have the book there, Joel, if you want to show people.
Oh, sure.
Build wealth, build real estate wealth, enjoy the journey of rental property investment. So as you can tell from what Joel has been saying, it really covers everything from A to Z. And if you're thinking of getting into this, I would really encourage you to reach out. And as Joel said, educate yourself, and no better way than reading the book. So,
Can I just mention the website for the
oh no, I
book?
was gonna turn it over to you. Yeah, if you
Yeah.
want to just give some more information to people.
Yeah, the site that's dedicated to the book is very simple. It's joelmillerbooks.com. JoelMillerbooks.com. And on the homepage there, you can click on a button that shows you the entire table of contents in fairly good detail that shows
Mhm,
you what we cover. And also there's another button that'll allow you to see sample content from each of the chapters, some of the meatiest paragraphs there. And you can it's filled with like about 150 different checklists of everything from uh, questions to ask prospective tenants,
mhm,
questions to ask references, things you need to do for due diligence when you're looking at buying a property. There's even there's a list there for the basic tools you might need if you don't have any tools and you're getting
yeah.
started. And that's why it's becoming the people that write about it review it. They say it's not a book you kind of buy and stick on your shelf and you say, "Hey, I read that. That's cool." This is the kind of book you buy and park on your desk because you're going to refer to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Ron LeGrand got a copy of it and he reviewed it and he said, "I wish I would have had his book when I was getting started."
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's almost like a manual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes you from mindset through the whole property acquisition stuff. Talks about financing property, taking care of property, taking care of tenants, and like we said, understanding there's discussion about riches and wealth. And then
Mm,
it goes on to some other philosophical things, best practices for life and business.
excellent. Well, listen, thanks again, Joel. Really appreciate it. Thank you for watching and listening. I will see you all again very soon. Thank you.
Oh, John, thank you.